to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Ahead of their big showdown, big rematch this upcoming Saturday, Christina Linardatou said this about Alicia Baumgardner. She said, as much as she's improved with her skills, her ego and her head have grown with it.
Has Alicia Baumgardner started drinking her own Kool-Aid?
No, I wouldn't go that far, I wouldn't. I first spoke to Alicia Baumgardner approximately 3 years ago in August of 2020, the year the pandemic hit, and this is a fighter that was always very confident, always had a big personality, and I think the biggest difference between now and then is that more people have become acquainted with this fighter.
But the same way she is now, that's the same way she was then.
At least in my experience, supremely confident and a supreme competitor. So I wouldn't say that Alicia's gotten a big head. I wouldn't say that.
Few interesting tidbits about this fight. How we got here. Initially, Christina Linardatou was supposed to be fighting Mikaela Mayer at lightweight. But for one reason or another, the BBBOC decided not to license Christina.
They decided not to license her on the premise that Christina has a permanent lens in her eye, which was peculiar to say the least, since all of her boxing career she's had that lens, and the BBBOC approved her to fight Katie Taylor years ago.
They didn't have a problem with it.
You fast forward a few years, she's supposed to fight Mikaela Mayer in the United Kingdom, and all of a sudden the BBBOC takes a different stance. They decide that on the premise of Christina having that permanent lens, they won't license her.
They didn't.
Lucy Wildheart ended up standing in her place. Brian Cohen, who handles the career of Christina Linardatou, at least here stateside, one of her handlers, he had his own reservations, his own suspicions as to what was really going on. In any event, Mikaela Mayer's loss turned out to be Alicia Baumgardner's gain. A chance for redemption, a chance for revenge.
Yeah.
And you will notice that the commission in Michigan,
They don't seem to be giving Christina a hard time, knock on wood.
the Michigan Unarmed Combat Commission, they don't seem to be giving Christina the same hard time that the BBBOC was giving her.
Let's hope it stays that way.
Really excited about this weekend's fight. I'd go as far as saying that I like Linardatou versus Baumgardner more than I would have liked Linardatou versus Mayer, because these two fighters, they actually have history.
Both fierce fighters.
Alicia Baumgardner is some years older, more experienced, and more seasoned than when Christina first met her, and rematches are often won by the fighter that can make the most adjustments. I happen to think in this situation, that's Alicia more than Christina, because Christina's a pressure fighter. Pressure fighters don't change much in between fights.
Most of the time you see Alicia Baumgardner in action, she has the look of a pure boxer, an economic outside jabber, moving lateral and setting traps. But in her last fight with Elham Mekhaled,
she wasn't as reserved as she usually is, pot-shotting the opponent from a safe distance from the outside. With Elham Mekhaled, she was really stepping into her punches and bringing hard punches over, being aggressive.
she looked like a boxer puncher.
She'll need that spite. She'll need that aggression this weekend to fight Christina Linardatou off.
Is it possible that over time, Alicia Baumgardner has grown enough as a fighter that she has two base styles, that she can be that pure boxer,
And most of the time she is, but she can also be that boxer puncher, that spiteful puncher that looks to hurt their opponent and lay into them.
like I said, that's how she looked with Elham Mekhaled.
The key to beating a relentless pressure fighter, a strong puncher like a Christina Linardatou, a fighter that wants to stay in your face, is you have to alternate between offense and defense. You can't rely on just one. You can't spend too much time on your bike on the outside because you're going to get outworked, but you can't spend too much time on the inside selling out because you're giving the pressure fighter what they want.
You're doing half the work for them.
You have to alternate. Kind of like what we saw this past weekend with Jaron Boots Ennis and Roman Villa. It's that same stylistic matchup. It is that same dichotomy.
This upcoming Saturday in Michigan, Alicia Baumgardner gets to show Christina Linardatou everything she's learned since they initially met.
I look forward to seeing it. In men's lightweight news broke earlier today via Paco Veracel, the president of the WBO, that the game is over. Teofimo Lopez just informed me in writing that he will retain his WBO junior welterweight title. So that means that previous order for Arnold Barboza and Jose Ramirez to fight for the newly vacated title, it has been rescinded, or it will be.
Rick Merrigan was going to have to put that together. Both Jose Ramirez and Arnold Barboza are his fighters.
Since Teofimo Lopez is keeping the brown belt and he's decided not to chuck it, I can only imagine that now he's going to have to face one of them as his mandatory challenger. The implications of Teofimo keeping the belt.
Well, since he announced his retirement and he said he was going to vacate the title, I had to hold off from ranking him on the Ring IQ pound for pound list.
Because the rules are what the rules are. No fighter absent of a world title is allowed to maintain a rank. The list is only for winners and only for champions. Emphasis on champions. Reigning champions, not former champions.
Current ones.
You're not being rated for the fighter that you used to be, the fighter that you might have been years ago when you were a champion.
No.
You're being rated for the fighter that you are up until this point, here today. Oh, the fighter's track record comes into it, it does.
But in order to be considered, just to be considered for a rank on the Ring IQ pound for pound list, you have to be a champion. You have to have a belt.
You don't get in the door without one. Teofimo Lopez, he's keeping his.
As Paco so eloquently put it, the game as it were. The game is over. Him announcing his retirement just to get attention.
That's how it reads. A publicity stunt for theatrical effect.
Much time did Teofimo spend trying to convince people that he was really gone, that he was really retired?
Just for this to be the end game. Now, as a result of this, he's going to have to fight one of those guys. He's going to have to fight either Arnold Barboza or Jose Ramirez. But there was an interesting development right before this news broke.
It appears that Devin Haney had intentions of moving up in weight and taking on Arnold Barboza for the newly vacated WBO title.
At least he must have been considering it. It being that he asked for 24 hours to make a decision, more time to decide if that's what he wanted to do. And the WBO denied Devin Haney's request for that extension.
They put him on the spot.
Up until that news broke, I had no idea he was targeting that newly vacated WBO title. Haney contacted the WBO shortly after the sanctioning body announced plans to move forward with its 140-pound title fight between Jose Ramirez and Arnold Barboza.
Haney reached out to the WBO and the WBO responded.
He reached out asking for more time, to which the WBO replied, "I refer to your email communication dated July 11th in response to our resolution pertaining to the provisions concerning Team Haney and whether he will move up to the junior welterweight division to face Arnold Barboza." WBO Championships Committee Chairman Luis Batista Salas informed John Hornover, Haney's attorney, in an official ruling obtained by BoxingScene.com, Team Haney is requesting that the 24-hour period given be triggered after the decision is made by Teofimo Lopez regarding his WBO Junior Welterweight Championship. Wherefore, having considered the arguments provided by Team Haney, this committee is denying the request and consequently enforcing the conditions set forth by this committee in its resolution.
And the conditions were, if Teofimo Lopez was going to chuck the belt, they were going to move forward with a Barboza versus Ramirez title fight.
They weren't going to wait around for Devin Haney to make up his mind and enable his indecision. They were going to move forward with a Barboza versus Ramirez fight.
And what's interesting is that Devin Haney's name has been tied to a lot of potential scenarios. A potential Lomachenko rematch, offer he says he made to Shakur Stevenson.
An offer he claims to have made down there at lightweight for a fight with Shakur. And now this, we find out that he was vying to fight for the newly vacated WBO title.
But he wasn't committed.
He wanted more time, whereas the WBO preferred something more official and documented, which prompted the call to order on Tuesday. Lopez was granted the same 24-hour period to confirm or refute that claim, as was Haney to determine his plans to move up in weight and enforce his WBO super champion status to challenge for the WBO 140-pound title. From the Haney side, they prefer a more linear approach than for their timeline to run parallel with Lopez. The logic fits, as a Lopez-Haney fight is by far the highest profile fight you can make and the most lucrative.
So now that Teofimo Lopez has decided to keep the belt, he's decided to stay WBO Ring Magazine and lineal champion. The question is, who's he going to fight next? Is it going to be Arnold Barboza or is it going to be Devin Haney?
Devin Haney has the same status, the same privilege that Alexander Usyk had, that Terence Crawford had. The opportunity to move up in weight as a WBO super champion to challenge for the title at a higher weight.
You know, when Terence moved up and became Jeff Horn's mandatory challenger, or when Usyk moved up and became Anthony's mandatory challenger, all by way of the WBO.
Devin has that same privilege. He can move up in weight and challenge Teofimo straight away, if he so desires, as his mandatory challenger. So the question is, who's Teofimo going to fight next? Is he going to end up fighting Devin? And if things don't work out with Devin, is he going to end up fighting Arnold Barboza?
What about all that stuff about Devin versus Shakur or Devin versus Prograis?
All of that stuff is immaterial. All of that stuff is in the air.
Devin drives a hard bargain.
Haney versus Lopez has more of a profile than Haney versus Prograis, and Haney versus Lopez, Lopez, that's a more winnable fight for Devin than Prograis, I'd say.
What about Shakur?
Pardon me for saying so, but I don't think Devin Haney wants to boil down to 135 anymore. Not for a Shakur-Stevenson fight. That fight isn't worth now what it could be worth later.
I never thought that was going to be Devin's next fight anyway.
Devin's busting at the seams. He needs to move up in weight. I figured the Lomachenko fight would likely be his last fight as a lightweight.
Question is, who's he going to end up fighting now? Will it be Lopez or will it be Prograis?
We'll see. If Teofimo Lopez has it his way, he'll be the next man that Devin Haney fights. Teofimo Lopez, who took to his social media and stated, "Yo, Devin Haney, since you were so quick to jump into the mix for my WBO championship belt, let's make the fight happen so the world can see who is about the action. And no, you will not be the A-side. I hold the king title of the division as well, so don't run away, bitch."
Teofimo raises a valid point. If Devin Haney was interested in fighting for the newly vacated WBO title, surely he'll be interested in challenging Teofimo for it. Challenging him makes for a bigger, better fight.
The one that's hard to make. You'll notice that Teofimo stated in plain English, he'll be the A-side in that fight because he'll be the defending champion and Devin will be the challenger.
Teofimo raises a valid point. He does. Devin was interested in fighting for the vacant WBO title. Is he still interested if Teofimo has it? If he has to go through him in order to get it?
Teofimo, who's coming off of a career-best performance opposite the ring then champion Josh Taylor. How does a fight with Devin differ from that one? How does a fight with Devin differ from a fight with Josh?
Josh Taylor's a naturally bigger man than Devin Haney, and a bigger puncher, I'd say. He's also a more aggressive fighter than Devin Haney.
Devin's a lot more defensively minded than Josh. You want to pay attention to that because what Teofimo did in that fight was he used Josh's aggression against him.
Counterpunching, he's a counterpuncher.
Immediately after the fight, Teofimo Lopez said body shots were the key to getting the win over Josh Taylor. He credits Taylor for surviving. Roy Jones Jr. once said, "It's not that these guys are not good, it's just that we make it look easy," Lopez said on the Porterway podcast. So, it's just really that. Body shots. That's what I focused on. I know how to break him down. Somehow, some way, towards the midway point of the fight, I was like, I gotta start slowing him down. So let me go to the body and attack more. And it made it much easier for me. Lopez said he tried his best to stop Taylor, but conceded that the former undisputed 140-pound champion knew how to survive. I went for it when I had to. Taylor's a big guy. He knows how to survive because of his experience. I think he was going in that ring at like 165 pounds. Big boy.
Teofimo looked sensational in that Josh Taylor fight. Sensational. A far cry from how he looked the fight before that with Sandor Martin, but you will notice that Sandor Martin is a more defensively minded fighter, far more defensively minded than Josh Taylor. And the same applies to Devin Haney. He's a defense-first guy.
You want to pay attention to that if they do end up fighting. Teofimo Lopez is a boxer-puncher, but more specifically, a counter-puncher. He baits his opponents to throw so he can counter what they throw.
Thus, being aggressive with Teofimo standing in front of him,
it's not really a good idea. Teofimo is most effective when he's getting off his counter shots, and he's most vulnerable when he's the one who has to pursue the opponent, when he's the one who has to give chase, like what we saw in the Sandor Martin fight, like what we saw in the George Kambosos fight.
That's important.
The aesthetic of Lopez versus Haney would be somewhat different than the aesthetic we just saw in Lopez versus Taylor. It would, because Devin don't fight nothing like Josh Taylor. And I don't think that Devin would approach a Lopez fight with the same strategy we just saw in the Lomachenko fight. Quite the opposite. I don't think
he'd want to spend as much time in the pocket with Teofimo as what he spent in the pocket with Vasyl Lomachenko.
With Vasyl Lomachenko, Devin knew that he's got to open up a little more and fight this guy off, because if he doesn't, he's running the risk of being outworked. In truth, I think he did get outworked. I think he lost the fight. The judges didn't see it that way, but most other people did.
In any event, he's not going to fight Lopez the same way that he fought Loma. It's a different fight entirely, and if I'm being honest, it's more up Devin Haney's alley than the Loma fight.
Devin's a pure boxer, and pure boxers don't like volume. Now, Teofimo, God bless him, he's a great counterpuncher, but he's not a volume puncher, and he's quite vulnerable if you force him to give chase, if you force him to come forward. See, Devin Haney, he might have a slight height advantage and reach advantage over Teofimo, and I think he'd elect to stay behind the jab, stay behind the straight punches, and don't throw too much.
Don't mix it up with him in the pocket, and don't give him anything to counter.
Devin Haney's strategy for Lopez, I think, would look a little more like what we saw in the Kambosos fight than what we saw in the Loma fight.
He's going to be more defensive. He won't open up as much.
He'll do this in order to set traps, set Teofimo Lopez up.
Could Lopez hurt him? Could Lopez stop him? Of course he could. Lopez is a bigger puncher than Devin Haney by and large.
But delivering that power shot, that knockout punch, it could prove difficult opposite the ring, a taller, longer fighter who's staying on the outside, being economic, and not giving you as much to counter. Not giving you as much to counter as Josh Taylor did.
To get a pure boxer like Devin Haney, to get a pure boxer out of their comfort zone, you've got to step into your jab, apply a lot of pressure, and throw punches in bunches. But we've seen at least 2 times already that when Teofimo Lopez tries to pressure his opponents, he's quite vulnerable.
Got walked into a big punch that dropped him in the Kambosos fight and dropped 2 times in the Sandor Martin fight, all while coming forward, all while stepping into his punches. Teofimo at his best is a counterpuncher, not a pressure fighter.
But he tries to apply pressure, he gets caught.
So at minimum, what you need to know is that while Teofimo looked sensational with Josh Taylor, Devin Haney's not Josh Taylor. He don't fight like Josh Taylor. Not as aggressive, not as come forward, not as gung-ho. He's the opposite.
He's defensively minded.
Now, Devin Haney was interested in the WBO title when he thought it was going vacant. Is he still interested in it now that Teofimo has decided he's going to keep it? He's going to hang on to it. The ball is in Devin Haney's court.
Does he want to fight or does he not want to fight?
We'll find out shortly.